Hello, everyone. As been introduced, my name is Rywon Yang. I'm a senior researcher at Green Technology Center, Korea. Today, I would like to give you a presentation about Korea's efforts in achieving carbon neutral society. And as been introduced, my background is law. So today, I would like to focus more on the Framework Act on carbon neutrality and green growth. It could be a little bit boring, but if you have any questions while I do my presentation, please do not hesitate to ask me questions. So just to give you a brief background about Green Technology Center where I work, it's a public research institute in Korea under the Ministry of Science and ICT, and our main research focal area is climate technology policy and climate technology cooperation. So we are working very closely with our partner countries, especially developing countries. We would like to support them to secure the climate technologies in their country. So we support from developing strategies, technology identification, climate technology project design, feasibility study, and also by linking it to funding, climate fund. This is an interesting slide that I wanted to share. I believe that you guys are already aware about UNFCCC, the Paris Agreement, the structure of it. And within the Paris Agreement, we have two different mechanisms, one for technology, one for finance. So for technology, it would like to, under the technology mechanism, there are different organizations that would like to help developing countries in developing technology and also diffusing, disseminating climate technology. And for each, in each country, the technology, under the technology mechanism, in each country has a focal point. In Korea, that is Ministry of Science and ICT. And under the financial mechanism, I believe that you guys are already aware, have heard about institution called GEF, Global Environment Facility, or Green Climate Fund, right? So they're the operating entity of the financial mechanism. And similarly to technology mechanism, under the financial mechanism, there are national focal points. In Korea, that is Ministry of Economy and Finance. And GTC has its role, double role under each national focal point. So under the Ministry of Science and ICT, we are a legally designated entity for climate technology cooperation. And under the Korean NBA, which is short for National Designated Authority, the Ministry of Economy and Finance, we are acting as a delivery partner for GCF Readiness Project. So this is just a institutional setup that I wanted to share, and because the theme of this presentation is all about institutional framework. So we work worldwide with different countries and with different international organizations. So moving on to our core subject today. So I would like to give you a presentation about our institutional framework on carbon neutrality, and I would like to explain it around this Carbon Neutrality Act. But before going into that, we have a history of developing this carbon neutrality agenda in Korea. So I would like to explain a little bit about this, the history of it. Yes, you guys have heard about it, this is great. So I will just try to put up this chat box at one side. So if there's anything that I could respond, give you a response live, I will try to do it.
It's okay, Ms. Yang. Sorry. Maybe I can just collect all the questions and you can respond to them later at the end.
Great. Okay. So coming back to my presentation, there are key milestones in shaping the carbon neutrality agenda in Korea. So, for example, at the left side, left bottom side, you can see that we have an act called Framework Act on Low Carbon Green Growth. So this concept of green growth was conceived as a core political agenda in Korea in the late 2000s, so around 2009. So we had a growing national and global concerns about the greenhouse effect and the rise of the global mean temperature at that time. And under the leadership of developed countries, different countries joined forces to reduce the GHG emissions through legally binding international agreements and decisions such as, Kyoto Protocol or Bali Roadmap and etc. And during this time, Korea was facing low economic growth after already having achieved a rapid economic growth through its key industries such as heavy and chemical industry and the electronics industry. So as a result of such an industrial structure, Korea's level of GHG emissions was the 6th highest among the OECD countries in 2005, with its rate of increase ranked the highest in the world. So Korea's economic and social structure heavily reliant on energy intensive industries was not apt to cope with the tightening regulations of the developed countries related to climate change. So that was the basic concern in Korea at that time. So a paradigm shift was needed to tackle this low economic growth and to increase the nation's energy independence. So as a solution, in 2008, one of our previous president, Myung-Bak Lee, announced green growth as the main objective of the Korean government to make the transition towards a low carbon society. So this was legislated into this Framework Act on Low Carbon Green Growth, which set out the key policy directions in regard to energy and climate change. Now, the implementation of the policies is outlined in the specific act of each sector, like energy law or act on GHG emission permits, etc. And these acts should follow the key principles and objectives set out by this Framework Act. But then, as we all know, Paris Agreement was adopted in 2015. And with the ratification of the Paris Agreement, the issue of climate change got heavier attention, and the policy started to structure around climate change. So, however, it was not in the mainstream of our Framework Act. It was more focused on the agenda green growth. So the act does not really explicitly mention climate change in the objective. But still, we were continuing to follow the international efforts. We submitted the INDC, Intended National Determination Contribution, in 2015. We updated GHG emission reduction target roadmap in 2018. We have updated it in 2020. So we are continuously working more toward climate change. And then the COVID-19 happened. So with the COVID-19, Korea adopted a stimulus package called Green New Deal with a budget of 137 billion USD to tackle the economic crisis and social inequality in the face of the climate crisis and economic recession caused by COVID-19. So in this policy, carbon neutrality was mentioned explicitly for the first time as a policy target. In 2020 December, following the obligation of the Paris Agreement, Korea submits the long-term low-emission development strategy, in short, we call LT-LEDS, to the UNFCCC, which was named the 2050 Carbon Neutrality Strategy. So at this time, there was a growing need to adopt a law on carbon neutrality to ensure the implementation of this strategy. So 8 different legislation drafts were submitted by different deputies at the National Assembly. And after lots of consultation and deliberation, finally, we adopted the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth in 2021. And we were the 14th country to legislate carbon neutrality worldwide. So that's after, for example, European Union, Sweden, UK, France, Germany, mostly European countries. But also we have Japan, which has adopted this type of act. So I'm trying to yes. So what is in fact carbon neutrality? I'm sure that you have already had lots of sessions on the concept of carbon neutrality. So this new framework act defines the carbon neutrality as following. So in the technical sense, the carbon neutrality is a state where greenhouse gas emissions emitted, released, or leaked out into the atmosphere become net zero as they are offset by greenhouse gas absorption elsewhere. So technically, it doesn't mean that we will not emit the GHG emissions. It's more like at some other place, it will be offset by absorption. But what does it really mean for in the sense of the carbon neutral society? So our act defines it as a society in which people lower or eliminate dependence on fossil fuel and lay the foundation for finance, technology system, etc., for adaptation to the climate crisis and just transition. So we have three different concepts here in carbon neutrality. When we focus on carbon neutrality in a technical sense, it's more about mitigation, right? But when we come to carbon neutral society, it also, also includes the concept of adaptation and just transition. So moving on to Carbon Neutrality Act, this is the basic framework of our new framework act. And we have the overall national vision, strategies to implement that vision. We have key pillars such as mitigation, adaptation, just transition. And of course, we did not throw out the concept of green growth. So we have green growth concept as one of the key pillars. So what has been changed from the previous Framework Act in 2009 and from the new one, the 2021 Framework Act? So the key difference is, as you can see from the objective, as I mentioned earlier, in 2009, we only mentioned about low carbon green growth. And we don't specifically mention about climate change. But when we come to 2021, we specifically now mention about reducing GHG emissions and adapting to climate change. And also we have this just transition concept, as you can see in the blue highlighted phrase, resolve economic, and environmental, and social disparity. Another couple of difference is that we have a decision-making body in the 2009 Act, that is Green Growth Committee. And we have a similar committee now, which focuses also to the carbon neutrality. But it's not just about the naming, it's about its status and size. Because before, the Green Growth Committee was under the office of the Prime Minister. But now this Carbon Neutrality Committee is right under the presidential office. And even for the size, the Green Growth Committee is only, the maximum member is 50. Meanwhile, the Carbon Neutrality Committee's maximum number of the members are 100. So in terms of status and in terms of size, it has changed a lot. One final thing that I would like to mention is about the reduction targets. Before, we don't mention specific target. Now we mention very specific target, legally binding target, which is to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and also reduce national GHG emission by 35% from the 2018 levels by 2030. This is the minimum level that we need to achieve. Yeah. Moving on to the next slide. So it has lots of statutory plans that need to be set up. And for example, we have a national vision stated by the Act, which is transition to a carbon neutral society and promotion of harmonious development of economy and environment. In order to achieve that national vision, we have two different goals. One is national strategy, as you can see in the left side, and the other is GHG reduction target. So national strategy is adopted every 5 years. So once it's adopted, it will be re-examined every 5 years. The national GHG reduction target, this is in fact the NDC. It's just different name. So in the international society, the name will be NDC. Internally, domestically, we just call national mid and long-term GHG reduction target. this document sets a specific target, and it's also re-examined every 5 years, has sectoral reduction target and annual GHG reduction targets. In order to achieve these two big strategy and one big target, we have a national framework plan that needs to be adopted every 5 years and renewed every 5 years. So the statutory plans that I just mentioned, that is the plans that specifically mentioned in the Framework Act. Here, what we're seeing is that under this Framework Act, there's different acts in different sectors that needs to be aligned with the Framework Act. For example, like energy, there's Energy Act, Energy Use Rationalization Act. We have, like, for example, emission trading. For finance, we have National Finance Act, etc., etc. But the key point is that these acts should be, as I mentioned, aligned with the Framework Act on carbon neutrality. So each act has its own statutory plans, like this, for example. And these should be also in line with the Framework Act, the objectives that's set by Framework Act, and the statutory plans that you saw in the previous slide. So national GHG emission target or national strategy on carbon neutrality. So these, when we renew each and different statutory plans in each and different relevant laws, we need to consider the final objective that has been set by the Framework Act. So this hierarchy has been revised and streamlined by adopting this new Framework Act. So how are we managing the GHG emission in Korea? As I mentioned earlier, one of the key difference of this new Framework Act is specifically stating the reduction target. As you can see on the right side, the target is now officially enshrined in the Act, and we now have the new GHG emission reduction target that was adopted, I think, 2021. It set the goal to reduce 40% from 2018 level, and this yearly average reduction rate is 4.17% per year. This is higher than any other developed country. So considering our energy intensive industrial structure, this is very highly ambitious target. So we need to work really hard to get there. But specifically, how are we managing? How are we going to achieve this target? So we have two different systems. So for example, the first one is GHG target management system. So government designates entities, the companies in Korea that emit certain standards, as you can see from the left bottom box table. For example, for business entity who emits more than 50,000 tons of CO2 equivalent, or place of business that emits more than 15,000 tons of CO2 equivalent, they will be designated as entities who need to submit GHG reduction target and plan. So this should be submitted every year, and if they don't achieve this target that they have submitted, they need to pay fine. Second system is, I believe that everyone is already fully aware of this system. It's emission trading scheme. So not all the countries have adopted emission trading scheme, but in Korea we have started this system a while ago. And within the system, we cover 70% of national GHG emissions. So it's also from energy sector, industry sector, aviation sector, and etc. So the basic concept is that a company who emits high emission will be provided with by the government to permit that they can emit this amount of emission every year. And the company A will be working on to reduce their emission, their emission, GHG emission, right? So within this effort, they have, let's say they have successfully reduced what they actually emitted. So they will have remaining emission permit. They can sell this emission to other companies who have emitted more than they were permitted. So they will buy the remaining emission permit and to compensate what they have actually produced. So this is the basic scheme. It's what we call market mechanism. And through this system, what Korea has actually achieved is what you can see on the right side. So the orange line, that is the certified emission, meaning what they have actually emitted. So in comparing to 2019 and 2020, we see a little bit of reduction that has been made in the certified emissions. So this shows that the emission trading scheme is actually effective in reducing the national GHG emissions. This is not a system to reduce GHG emission, but it's more about how we are managing and monitoring the data of GHG emissions. So we have an institution called Greenhouse Gas Inventory and Research Center, GIR, under the Ministry of Environment. So their role is to do overall management of national GHG inventory and also managing national GHG information. So when we produce like a biannual report or any kind of report to UNFCCC, all the GHG related data would be produced by this institution. And they will not work solo. They will work with in cooperation with different ministries of different sectors. Moving on to next is newly introduced features by this act. I think I'm running out of time, so I'll try to go faster. So a couple of things. We have climate change impact assessment. So in case of implementation of plan or project that produces a massive amount of GHG, analysis and assessment of climate change impact is mandatory. So we cover 10 subject areas, and once the assessment is done, they also need to set up a plan. Adopt measures like for certain project, they need to set mitigation target considering the GHG emission projection, and need to submit response measures such as like saying that they will use hydrothermal energy or they will reuse wastewater, and that goes same for adaptation. The second system is GHG reduction cognitive budget system. This is what we call like carbon budgeting or green budgeting in other countries. So we analyze the impact of the budget and fund they have on climate change and reflect the analysis result in the financial operation of the national and local level government. So what we do is there's a project, and if it has a high mitigation impact, the government could decide that they would increase the financial investment. But if the project has low mitigation impact, they could ask to change the project plan. So this is how they are trying to mainstream the climate change issue in the budgeting system. The third is just transition. I believe everyone also heard about this concept. This is well discussed in international society and in Korea. And in this act, we are defining it as identifying social groups vulnerable to climate crisis and regions and industries where socioeconomic discrimination is being aggravated. And it's also to prepare support measures to elevate such status and measures to strengthen the capability to prepare for disasters. So to give you some of the examples, we can designate a special district for just transition where we would try to improve help reemployment or support business conversion or establish just conversion support center. We also have climate response fund that was specifically fund climate carbon neutrality related objectives. And we have different sectoral approaches depending on mitigation and adaptation. So So for mitigation, we have green building, green transport, green carbon neutral city, low emission transition, carbon sink, and each has different activities under that sector, and different ministries will be in charge of implementing these sectoral approaches. Same goes to the adaptation, monitoring and projection of climate crisis, public institutions, adaptation measures, water management, promotion of conversion of agriculture, forestry, fisheries, and etc. So a couple of examples. We have, for example, carbon neutrality roadmap that was adopted by Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport. So each ministry actually has adopted different carbon neutrality related roadmap or policy. And for MOLIT, they have, for example, planning to do life cycle performance of building information systems, zero energy building, green remodeling. For transport sector, EV transition, transport data management, and etc. This is Ministry of Science and ICT. So they are mandated to support the R&D of different technologies in Korea. And for the carbon neutral technology, they have identified 10 key technology sectors for carbon neutral technology innovation and set up the strategy for R&D. So how does it actually work within the country? So as I mentioned, we have 2050 Carbon Neutrality Committee who will make deliberations on different plans, and overall coordination is done by Minister of the Environment, and they will communicate with different ministries of different sectors, which will actually develop policies and sectoral plans. But that was the national level, and now we come to local level. And local level, we have different administrative units for the local government, and they have two key responsibilities. One is to set up the framework plan. Second one is to set up the adaptation response plan. And this is also work together with the national level structure. So, for example, as you can see, there's not just a 2050 Carbon Neutrality Committee in the central level, but they will also have local level committee. So they will review the plans and submit the plan to the national government. And within this process, the central government will also provide a sectoral support to the local governments. So final slide. So key takeaways. This is just like a summary of what I just explained up until now. So Korea has set up a legal backbone to make the transition toward carbon neutral society, and this allowed to streamline different statutory plans of different sectors and different acts, as you have seen in the previous slides. So this is a key importance of why we adopted this Framework Act and why we need this Framework Act. Second thing is that this Framework Act now has a legally binding goal statement on carbon neutrality and GHG reduction target. So before, even though climate change was a very serious issue, nobody actually wanted to put like, we are going to reduce GHG emission target by certain percentage up until certain time, because that would be legally binding. And everyone was skeptical putting that word in the legal document. But now we're working very hard on it, and the government has realized that the international, following the international efforts, we need to, heighten our efforts. So that's why we have made this goal statement legally binding. Third is streamline national level and local level implementation scheme, as you have seen in the slide right before. So before, we still had some mention about national and local level cooperation, but with this Framework Act, we now have clear R&R and clear work procedure. Yeah. The fourth is strengthening climate change response by introducing new measures such as climate change impact assessment, the GHG reduction cognitive budget system. So now we see that climate change has really been mainstreamed in our policy adoption process. And finally, we have introduced the concept of just transition as a key pillar because this is the one of the important factors of the carbon when making the transition to carbon neutral society. Okay, so thank you very much for your presentation attention. I know that I have been going very fast, so if you have any question, I would like to answer it. Thanks.